Okay, we are starting Fungus, which is chapter 20, and I'm going to tell you, in general, some things about fungus that are a lot more helpful than what we went over before. So, with fungi, this is the second eukaryotic kingdom that we're covering. So, we're making our way through the kingdoms. We've been through the bacteria, the prokaryotes, and they were our only prokaryotes. And the next was Protista, so that was our very first kingdom with eukaryotes. Fungi is our second. Now, this kingdom, there is a lot of unified characteristics. So we don't have a lot of all over the place organisms that really don't have anything in common. So there are some basic characteristics about fungi that apply to all of them. First of all, they're in the kingdom fungi. Now, fungi can be unicellular or they can be multicellular. So we will talk about some unicellular fungi. The main ones are yeast because yeast falls into this kingdom. Also, they're all eukaryotic. They all have a nuclei. They all have membrane-bound organelles. So remember, our only prokaryotes were bacteria. So they're also heterotrophs. Fungus do not make their own food. They don't have chloroplast. They don't have chlorophyll. If you think about what a fungus looks like, you know what mold looks like or mushrooms, they're fungus. They're not green. They don't have chloroplast with chlorophyll. So they have a very special kind of digestion that we'll talk about in just a minute. Okay, and also fungi are a type of decomposer called a saprophyte. Now, saprophyte, there's all kinds of decomposers. Bacteria are decomposers. Fungus falls into a group of decomposers that only feed off dead and dying material. So that's what a saprophyte is. If we were talking later, and I don't know if we'll get to it or not, but when we're talking about detrivores, that's a type of decomposer that is our larger, like flies and buzzards, those type of organisms. So there's all kinds of decomposers, and saprophytic or saprophytes are the type of decomposer that fungi falls into. Now, some of the major features of fungi, first of all, is they do have cell walls, but it's composed of chitin. And I know that you don't want to think back into our molecular PowerPoints, but early on, chitin is a starch. And so that means it's only glucose units put together. And with plants, their cell wall was made of cellulose. And it also was a starch, but there were different glucose monomers than what chitin is. So chitin's really tough. It's a lot tougher than cellulose in its construction. And the reason it has to be tough is because fungus have to withstand harsh conditions. A lot of times, especially if we're talking about mushrooms, they live outside. They they have a very tough exterior, and it's made of that polysaccharide called chitin. It's a starch. Now, hyphae. If you look in the picture, the hyphae are these really long, stringy structures that form this mass. And down here, you can see at the bottom, the whole mass, once it gets at ground level, is called a mycelium. Hyphae individually are going to be the structures that release the enzymes into the environment to break their food down. They are extracellular digesters, and we talked about this before, but they release enzymes into the environment, and then they wait for those enzymes to do their work and break down the organic material, and then they absorb them back into the hyphae. So it's the tips of these long, stringy hyphae that actually have the enzymes that are released into the environment. Now, once they have this mass, this is at ground level because Fungus do not have true roots, stems, or leaves, and that's why they're not in the plant kingdom. They also don't have chloroplast. So they have this mass. It kind of looks like a drain clog or a whole mass of bean sprouts or something. That's your mycelium. And the mycelium can stretch for, miles. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you a picture of a mushroom when we get to that phylum, in which the mushroom itself is quite large, but the mycelium stretches for miles and miles underground. And this is part of the reason that it is so difficult when we talk about our fungal diseases to get rid of them, because if you notice, the above ground part of this structure is called a fruiting body. So there you've got a mushroom and you're looking at the cap of the mushroom and the stalk, but that's actually the fruiting body. What we see above ground is the reproductive structure. What we don't see, which is the true body, not the fruiting body, but the true body of any fungus, is this mycelium. So if you were to knock that mushroom down, then it may get rid of the fruiting body, but that mycelium is still stretching, and the mycelium can produce another fruiting body all along the way. So for this particular mushroom, actually, that's in Oregon, is protected, but it is the mushroom itself is quite large, but the mycelium stretches for 2 or 3 football fields, I think is what they say. So at any point, that mycelium can produce more fruiting bodies. So when we have these fungal infections, this mycelium, like let's take the fungus that gets on your foot, foot fungus. When you see the red bumps, athlete's foot, when you see the red bumps, that's the fruiting body. But what you don't see is the mycelium that is right at skin level or right below. So you actually have to be treating probably up onto the arch of your foot, not just between your toes where you see the rash, because this mycelium stretches a long way, and even after that rash goes away, that mycelium is still there, and you have to keep treating it or it just keeps coming back. So that's one of the reasons why they're pretty difficult to cure. All right, so the hyphae provide this larger surface area for nutrient absorption, which means all along the way, those hyphae are releasing enzymes into the environment. That's extracellular digestion, because they're digesting extracellularly outside of the cell, outside of the body. And then the type of nutrition is going to be absorptive, because once that is broken down, they will absorb back into the hyphae all of the digested material. All right, if you look here, there's some major features of fungi in the hyphae that we need to take a look at. If you look over to the right, at the top it's called septate hyphae, and then at the bottom there's aseptate. Now, look at the top one, the septate hyphae. These cross walls in between these cells are called septa, and there are openings in the septa called pores. And so with septate hyphae, they do have this demarcation between cells, but if you notice, the nuclei and the other organelles are able to go back and forth between cells because of these openings. So here you see the nuclei, the individual threads are the hyphae, the cross walls are called the septa, and of course there's cytoplasm. So one thing about these hyphae, with these pores, the organelles and the nuclei are free to move from one cell to the next. The septa allows nutrients in cytoplasm to flow. Now, when you've got the bottom, which is aseptate hyphae, there are no septa, there are no cross walls. And because of that, there's no demarcation in between the cells, and the nutrients and the organelles are just free to flow anywhere along that particular hyphae.